Hey, campfire crew, let's get it on. What Was He Up To? By Nicole D. Back when I was a solo driver, I was making a delivery in Memphis, Tennessee. The receiver kept me there for so long that my clock ran out at 7 hours, and I had to go to West Memphis to park for my 10-hour reset. When I got there, I had to park in the very back, and it was very dark in the lot. I took my dog Noodles out to go to the bathroom, and while I was walking him, I saw a man at the back of a trailer just standing there. He made me nervous, so I hurried my pup and then rushed him back into the truck. After that, I got out of the truck and started walking to the store so I could eat dinner, and while I was walking, I heard footsteps behind me. When I turned to look, it looked like the same man I had seen behind the trailer, and he walked behind me the entire time. No matter how circuitous of a route I took, he followed me. It freaked me out, but I wasn't really scared yet at that point. When I got inside, I found that the store was packed, and so was the restaurant, so I went and got a seat at the bar before it could be taken. I ordered my food and waited for it to come, and halfway through my dinner, my bladder reminded me that I needed to use the bathroom. So I told the waitress, "Hey, I'm not finished, I just have to go to the bathroom," and that I would be back. When I got back to my plate, my fork was on the right side of my plate. I looked around and didn't see the man that followed me inside, but now I was scared. I'm left-handed, and I always put my utensils on the left side of my plate. Something was done to my food by someone. I called the waitress over while I was still standing behind my chair and asked if she messed with my food. She said no, and then I asked her if she saw anyone else mess with it. And she said, "I'm sorry, I was too busy to have seen anybody." So she went and got the manager. I told the manager about the man that was creepily following me to the store and then disappeared when I entered. He got me a new meal and moved me to a seat closest to his office. Then he went back into his office and came out a few minutes later and sat down in the booth across from me. He said, "I looked through the camera feed, and a man did indeed come to where your food was sitting while you were gone. He put something in your mashed potatoes, stirred it, and left back outside of the building." He went on to say, "We don't have any cameras in the truck lot, so I don't know where he went. But I don't want you to leave this store alone. And I also need to report this to the police. Do you mind if I call them?" I told him, "No, I don't mind." So I sat there after I finished my meal and thanked him as he brought me a piece of pie on the house, and it was delicious. When the police came, they took a report and searched the grounds for the man, but they didn't find him. After a few hours in total, the police officer told me that he would drive me back to my truck. Then he told me he was going to ask his boss if they could post a police officer out there all night to watch for the man. His boss man allowed it, and the entire night there was a police officer parked in the deepest, darkest part of that lot, keeping watch. I appreciated it immensely. The man was never caught, but nothing bad happened to me or anyone else that night. I'm thankful to those police officers to this day, even though it has been a few years. Creepy Night by Mohammed Y. I was driving through eastern Washington on some state roads. There were no rest stops or cities, but I had done the route enough to know that there were these massive dirt areas every 40 miles or so where you could park safely away from the road. I decided to call it a night and closed my blinds and laid down to watch something on my phone. After roughly an hour, I heard someone trying to open the driver's side door. I hadn't heard any other vehicles on the road the whole time I was parked, but I got up to peek out the curtains. As I was looking out into the blackness of the driver's side window, I heard them try the passenger side door. I peeked down from the top of the curtain but couldn't see anything, so I started my truck and kicked on the lights. I was fairly freaked out at that point, so I wasn't opening the curtains but just kind of peeking through them. Nothing. Nobody was standing near either of the doors or parked within sightline. I took a deep breath and closed the sleeper curtains because for some reason that was going to make things better, right? So after laying back down and convincing myself that something blew against the truck and it only sounded like the doors, it was fairly windy outside and on just plenty of flat ground, I heard what sounded like someone trying to pry open the vents on the sleeper. The door handles started clicking again, and the truck started shifting like someone was climbing on it. I hit the little alarm button in the sleeper, hoping to spook them off, but it didn't do anything but add to the noise of the door handles, finger tapping on the windows and chassis, and the hiss of air coming out of the suspension. And suddenly it stopped. A few moments later, when I could only hear myself breathing and my heart pounding, I heard another truck approach and then drive by. I spent the next few hours waiting for whatever it was to come back, but whoever or whatever it was never did. In the morning, I couldn't find any footprints or damage to my truck, but on every window were tiny human-looking handprints, like a toddler had licked their hand and stuck it on my window over and over again. This Freaked Me Out by Gary B. Over my lifetime in the trucking industry, I've had several occurrences while driving cross-country. Mostly I've had people walking out in front of the truck while going down the road. I have seen phantom trucks and vehicles beside me and behind me, and I've actually had a phantom person at a loading receiving dock just standing there in my mirrors while I was trying to stage for the next morning. Most of the times I was pretty well rested and was operating on what would some consider a graveyard shift to avoid traffic. But I do have one instance that really freaked me out. I had just parked my rig and went to a remote truck stop in Montana. I had returned to my truck and got into the sleeper to rest before continuing down the road, and I was just lying there in bed. And I felt my truck rock for no reason I could think of at the time. I got up and looked around the front of my truck and the side of my cab, thinking maybe a bear or an animal had been messing around the truck. When I looked into my mirrors, I saw what seemed like a guy climbing up the side of my trailer. The doors were shut and sealed and had a lock on each of them, but when I went to grab the handle of my door to open it, I believe I saw the person just vanish into the side of my trailer, and I was like, what the hell? I got out to see what was going on, and yes, I took my pistol with me to investigate. I got out of the truck with my .45 S&W and flashlight to check the trailer out, and of course my trailer was secured, the shipper seal was there, and the lock was still locked. There was no way in hell anyone had entered the trailer. So I went around the whole truck, checking the other side and looking under the trailer for legs walking around, but there was nothing. Needless to say, I didn't get much sleep that night. I had to get back on the road several hours later to continue my trip. Still have no explanation for that. The Corpse Bride by Chalesis. Driving home from a late shift, I came to a part of a road that is just a huge hill. It was kind of a low point, and then another huge hill again, but nothing but forest all around. As I was cresting the hill, I saw an orange van on its side at the very bottom of the hill, and there was a woman standing in a wedding dress next to it. I slowed down to see that she was covered in blood and thought, holy shit! This was way before cell phones, so I slowly passed, taking in her calm expression, and the blood all over her. And I remember distinctly looking at the undercarriage of the orange van. I pulled over to the right slightly past this wreckage and got out of the cab, took a look back, but there was nothing there. There was nothing there but empty, dark road. I freaked out, sped home hoping a cop would pull me over. I wasn't drunk, I wasn't tired, and I still don't know what I saw. I Almost Killed Them All by Doctor Who to You. I worked for a company that owned a Caterpillar D9 bulldozer. This thing weighed over 100,000 pounds, and they had to use a tractor from the 1980s with a drop trailer to move it off the property. Both were functional and as safe as they could be, but had seen better days. They asked me to deliver the bulldozer to another company, and I agreed. We loaded up the dozer, secured it to my trailer, and I was on my way. One of the intersections on this state route is notoriously bad. It's at the base of a hill, and if you're coming from the side the hill is on, you don't see the stoplight or traffic until you get over the peak of the hill. You still usually have plenty of room to stop. But as I was approaching this intersection, my CB antenna lit up, and a guy was basically screaming into it for traffic at the peak of the hill to slow down. The problem was that my CB wasn't tuned, and I only caught about every third word. I let off the accelerator when I peaked the hill, mostly because I hated that intersection. And I would have plenty of time to stop, even with the road conditions, if traffic was normal. Fortunately for me, traffic was not normal. There was a fresh, pretty bad accident at the intersection, and traffic had backed more than halfway up the hill. The accident had just occurred, so there were no emergency services on scene. I now had very little space to stop a very heavy load with a very old truck. I started downshifting and braking, realizing that I was going to be cutting it very close, and I started braking harder. Then I realized I was hitting large ice patches on the road, and the tires were slipping and jerking the tractor around. I heard the fifth wheel clanking, and I felt the trailer tugging on the tractor in a weird way, so I looked out my side driver's mirror, and I didn't see anything, including the dozer. In a panic, I whipped my head around to look out the passenger mirror, and the only thing I saw was the entire side profile of the tractor and the dozer. I had made a terrible mistake in letting that trailer get out from behind me. It was one of those, well, this is it, this is how I die moments. I was now jackknifing while still moving and still trying to slow the truck down while on an icy hill. I was headed for an intersection full of stopped passenger cars, and my truck weighed a lot. By this point, I was thoroughly convinced that I was about to involuntarily murder a whole bunch of people. I laid on the horn as much as I could, but I was also trying to work the steering wheel in an attempt to pretend I had control. Honestly, I hit a point where I basically realized I was just a passenger standing on a brake pedal. I didn't have enough room to correct anything, so I just went all out on the horn. The trailer tires finally heated up enough to start making a very loud and deep squeal. There were a bunch of people in front of me that got out of the way and ran from their cars. They were basically staring at an out-of-control death coming down the hill. The truck finally came to a stop within 3 feet of the last car in the intersection. I could sit on my truck's bumper and easily put my feet up on the car's bumper. The truck stopped with the tractor jackknifed, so I was blocking both lanes in the breakdown lane. I was sweating and shaking from the anxiety. As I was sitting in the now stopped truck, the people who had abandoned their cars were now screaming at me and pointing up the hill. I looked back up the hill to see another tractor, but a tanker trailer, basically reliving everything I just had, with much less space to work with due to my tractor blocking so much of the road. I got out of my truck and ran away from it. The second truck slid down, stopped, and parked parallel almost perfectly with my truck. Once his truck stopped, I could see he was experiencing the same thing I was. We were both extremely close to being in bad accidents, after all. Thankfully, he was pulling a dry tank, and I'm pretty sure that's the only reason he was able to stop. He was running much lighter than me. By this time, the guy on the CB got through to enough truckers at the top of the hill that they basically slowed everyone down. Once the adrenaline wore off, I almost passed out. I've operated a lot of different vehicles in my life, and that situation was easily the scariest operating situation I have ever lived. I had zero control of the situation, and that's a bad feeling for an operator. I remember the people that ran away from their cars were comforting me. It's been over 20 years since that happened, and I still get the willies when I think about it. Had I not been able to get that truck to stop, I would have ripped through all those passenger vehicles with little resistance. Another 5 miles per hour, or being in a different lane, just a little more ice, and even the time of day would have completely changed the outcome of that situation. And the scariest thing to me it would have been entirely my fault. Hey gang, thanks for listening to this episode of Uncle Josh's True Scary Stories. If you have a true scary story of any nature that you'd like to hear narrated on my podcast or channel, email it to unclejoshtruescarystories@gmail.com. I read them all. Please like, share, and subscribe to this YouTube channel. And guys, really share it. I keep getting these comments that say, you should have more subs, and I wish you had more subs. Well, that's cool in a gang, and I do too. Share it, and maybe I will get some. I'm not begging. This is something that I do for fun, guys. But why not get some more subscribers? What the hey? Anyway, follow me on social media. All the links to that are in the description below. And if you'd like to support the channel even heavier, find me on Patreon. A link for that is down there too. And of course, find my store on tpublic.com. Get yourself some campfire merchandise. Would love to do a live campfire one of these days. Working on that. And as we are getting close, if you've got a true scary Halloween story, send it to me now. Getting ready for our great Halloween extravaganza coming up real soon. Everybody, be excellent to each other. And until next time, be wary of things that go bump in the night. It could be anything. A ghost, a monster, or the guy next door.